My mother stopped recognizing me on a Wednesday in October. I know the exact day because I wrote it down. Not deliberately, I wasn't keeping a journal. But I came home from visiting her that afternoon and I sat at my kitchen table and I opened the Notes app on my phone and I typed, October 14th. She didn't know me today. And then I put my phone down and I didn't pick it up again for a long time. Her name is Dorothy. She is 78 years old and she has had Alzheimer's for 4 years, which means I have watched her disappear in stages, the way a tide goes out. Slowly at first, then faster, then one day you look up and the beach is completely empty and the waterline is somewhere you can barely see. The early years were the years of almost. She almost remembered. She knew my face, but sometimes not my name. She knew I was someone important, but couldn't place how. She would look at me with this particular expression, searching, reaching, the face of someone trying to catch something that keeps moving. And sometimes she caught it, and sometimes she didn't. The almost years were in some ways harder than what came after, because in the almost years, there was still something to lose. She stopped recognizing me completely 2 years ago, October 14th. I drove 40 minutes every Sunday to sit with her. I want to be clear about what that means. Not a Sunday here and a Sunday there when I happen to have time. Every Sunday, without exception. Through the winter when the roads were bad, and through the summer when I had other things I could have been doing, and through every ordinary Sunday of 2 years when she looked at me like I was a stranger who had walked into her room without knocking. Some Sundays she was calm. She would sit by the window with her hands folded and look out at the courtyard garden where the facility had planted roses, and I would sit beside her and sometimes talk and sometimes just be there. And she would occasionally glance at me with mild curiosity and then look away. Those were the okay Sundays. Some Sundays she was frightened. She didn't know where she was or who I was, and my presence in her room seemed to alarm her, and she would ask me to leave in a voice I had never heard from my mother before, thin and frightened and young somehow, like a child's voice coming out of an old woman's face. On those Sundays I would go into the hallway and I would stand there for a few minutes and then I would go back in and try again. And sometimes that helped and sometimes it didn't. I never stopped going. People asked me sometimes why I kept going when she didn't know me. My husband asked, gently, not critically. He came with me some Sundays, he understood, but he asked. My sister, who lives in Phoenix and visited twice a year, asked more directly. Does it help? Does it help her? Does it help you? I said, I don't know if it helps her, but I know who I am when I walk through that door. I am her daughter. I have always been her daughter. That doesn't stop being true because she can't remember it. I kept going. On a Tuesday in March, not a Sunday. I had gone on a Tuesday because the previous Sunday she'd had a difficult day and the staff had called to say she was calmer midweek. I drove the 40 minutes and I signed in at the front desk and I walked down the hall that I have walked down more times than I can count, past the activity room with the jigsaw puzzles and the nursing station and the bulletin board with the residents' art projects, and I pushed open the door to her room. She was sitting by the window. The afternoon light was coming in at a low angle the way it does in March, that particular thin gold that doesn't warm anything. She was wearing the blue cardigan, the one she has always called her good sweater, though it is not especially good, it is just the one she prefers. Her hands were in her lap. She was looking out at the courtyard. I said, "Hi, Mom. It's Barbara." I always said that. For 2 years, I always announced myself, because the staff said it helped, because it was gentler than letting her be startled. "Hi, Mom. It's Barbara." Like I was a visitor introducing myself, like my own mother needed to be told my name. She didn't turn around right away. I set my bag down. I pulled the chair close to the window, the chair I always sit in, the one I have sat in so many times that the staff keeps it positioned slightly closer to the window than the others. I sat down, and then she turned and looked at me. She looked at my face the way she used to look at it, not the searching, reaching look of the almost years, not the blank, polite look of a stranger, not the frightened look of the bad Sundays. She looked at me the way she looked at me when I was a child and I had come home from school, and she was standing in the kitchen, and she turned around and there I was, just her daughter, just Barbara, just the most ordinary and expected thing in the world. She said, "Barbara, there you are. I've been waiting for you." I heard my name in her voice. I had not heard my name in her voice in 2 years. I had said it to her. "Hi, Mom, it's Barbara." But she had not said it back. Not once in 2 years. And now she was saying it the way she used to say it, the way she said it my whole childhood, with that specific small lift on the first syllable that I had forgotten I remembered until I heard it, and remembered immediately and completely. I sat down on the floor, not in the chair, on the floor, right there in the middle of the room, because my legs did not work the way legs need to work in order to continue sitting in a chair. I just went down. I sat on the floor with my back against the side of the bed and my hands over my mouth, and I looked up at her. She looked down at me. She said, "What are you doing on the floor?" I said, "I don't know." She said, "Well, come up here and sit properly. I want to see your face." I got up. I sat in the chair. I turned it so we were facing each other, and I looked at her face. My mother's face. The one I have known my whole life. The one that had been looking through me for 2 years. And she was looking back. She was there. Wherever she had been, she was here, in this room, in this afternoon, knowing exactly who I was. She said, "You look tired." I said, "I'm okay." She said, "You always say that. You've been saying that since you were 17. I never believe it." I laughed. It came out wrong. Too wet, too broken. But she smiled at it anyway. The specific smile she has always had for my laughter. Like my laughter is something she is pleased to have caused. She reached out and took my hand. Her hands are smaller than they used to be. That is one of the things the disease takes. The substance of a person, the physical weight of them. She used to have strong hands, working hands, hands that made 3 meals a day for 30 years and wrung out mops and kneaded bread dough and held my face when I was sick and braided my hair every morning until I was old enough to insist on doing it myself. Those hands, smaller now, thinner, but still hers, holding mine in her lap. She said, "I want to tell you something." I said, "Okay." She said, "I know I'm not always here. I know there are days when I'm..." She paused. She looked at the window for a moment. Then she said, "I know there are days when I'm somewhere else. When I look at people and I don't know who they are. I know that happens. I'm not always present for it. But sometimes I know afterward. Like waking up from a dream and knowing you dreamed even if you can't remember what." I could not speak. She said, "I want you to know that even on those days, even when I can't find you..." She stopped again. She looked at her hands, at my hands inside hers. She said, "You're still in here somewhere. You've always been in here. I just can't always get to where you are." I was crying in a way I had not cried in a long time. Not quietly, Not the controlled kind. The kind that comes from somewhere deep that you have been keeping closed because there was no other way to keep going. And then someone opens the door. She said, "Don't cry." I said, "I can't help it." She said, "I know." You couldn't help it when you were 4 either. You cried at everything. The end of cartoons, spilled juice, everything. I laughed again, still broken, still wet. She patted my hand. We sat there for a long time. The light moved across the floor the way afternoon light moves. She told me about a dream she'd had about her mother's kitchen. Specific details, the yellow curtains, the smell of something baking, her mother's voice calling her name from another room. She told me she had been thinking about the summer I was 12 and we drove to the coast and the car broke down in a town neither of us had heard of, and we ate dinner at a diner where the pie was the best thing we had ever tasted, and we laughed about it for years after. I had forgotten that trip. She hadn't. She told me that she was proud of me, not for anything specific, just in general, just as a statement of fact, the way you state facts that don't require justification. She said, "I have always been proud of you, Barbara, from the very beginning. You were the kind of person who showed up, who kept coming back, whatever happened." I understood that she meant more than she was saying directly, that she knew, on some level, that I had kept coming back, every Sunday for 2 years, through the not knowing, through the asking me to leave, through all of it. She knew. She said, "I have always known you were there, even when I couldn't find you. You were always there." I drove home in the dark 2 hours later. I sat in my car in my own driveway for a long time before I went inside. My husband was in the kitchen. He looked at my face and he said, "What happened?" I said, "She knew me today." He came over and held me, and I cried again. Differently this time. Not the broken kind. Not the relieved kind. Something more complicated than either. Something that had grief in it, and gratitude in it, and 17 years of Sunday drives, and all the times she hadn't known me, and the one time today that she had. She didn't know me the following Sunday. I want to be honest about that. She was back in the Elsewhere place when I arrived. She looked at me with the polite curiosity of a stranger and accepted the flowers I brought and let me sit with her and didn't know who I was. That is how this disease works. There are no permanent returnings. There are only these moments, these brief, complete, inexplicable moments when something clears and the person you love is there, fully, the way they used to be. And then it closes again. I stayed anyway, 2 hours. I talked and she listened, and sometimes she talked about things I didn't follow, and I listened, and the afternoon light moved across the floor the way it always does. When I left, I said, "Bye, Mom. I love you." She looked at me kindly. She said, "You too, dear." She didn't know who she was saying it to, but she said it. I drove home. I will go back next Sunday. I will always go back. That is the only answer I have ever had to any of this. Go back. Keep going back. Sit in the chair by the window and hold the hand and wait. Not for recognition. I have stopped needing recognition. But because she is my mother, and I am her daughter, and that is true whether she can find me or not. She said, "You're still in here somewhere. I just can't always get to where you are." I am here, Mom. I am always here. I will keep coming back until there is no more back to come to. And then I will be grateful for the rest of my life for a Tuesday in March when the afternoon light came through a window and she turned and saw me and said my name the way she always said my name. "Barbara, there you are. I've been waiting for you." I was waiting too. My sister came with me the Sunday after. She flew in from Phoenix specifically for it, not to see my mother, though she saw her too, to see what I had been describing on the phone in the weeks since March, which she had listened to carefully and which I could tell she had not fully believed, not because she doubted me, but because she had not been there, and some things resist second-hand description. My mother did not know either of us that Sunday. She was in the Elsewhere place, calm, pleasant, cooperative with the staff, willing to eat lunch and have her cardigan adjusted and look out the window at the courtyard. Just not here, not in the room with us, not reachable. My sister sat next to me and watched our mother look through us, and I watched my sister understand, finally, the full weight of what I had been describing for 2 years. We drove home together afterward. My sister was quiet in the passenger seat for a long time. Then she said, "How do you keep doing it?" I said, "I just do." She said, "Every Sunday." I said, "Every Sunday." She looked out the window. She said, "I don't know if I could." I thought about that. I said, "I think you could. I think you don't know until you have to, and then you find out that you can." She said, "Aren't you angry that she doesn't know you're there?" I said, "I was, in the beginning. I was angry, and I was sad, and I drove home from some of those early Sundays, and I sat in my car and I screamed. Not every time, but sometimes. Because I had lost my mother twice, once to the disease and once to the not knowing, and the second loss is the one that never gets easier. I said, "But then something shifted. I can't explain exactly when or how. I just stopped needing her to know. She is my mother whether she knows I'm there or not. Being her daughter is not contingent on her recognizing me. I show up because that is who I am, not because of what I get back." My sister said, "That's remarkable." I said, "It's just love. Love is sometimes just showing up." She flew back to Phoenix the next day. She calls more often now. She is planning to move closer. She hasn't made the decision yet, but I can hear in her voice that she is getting there. She said, "I don't want to miss the time we have left with her, however that time looks." I said, "Come whenever you can. It counts. Even when she doesn't know you, it counts." My mother is still there. She has good weeks and hard weeks, and the doctors have stopped giving me timelines because timelines in this disease are more guesswork than science. She still has the blue cardigan. She still sits by the window and watches the courtyard. I drove there last Sunday. She was calm. She looked at me with that polite, curious look, and I sat beside her and I talked to her about my kids. She has always loved hearing about the children, even when she can't place who they belong to. Something about children's stories settles her. I told her about my daughter's school play and my son's soccer game, and the very long argument we had about whether the dog could sleep on the couch. She listened. She smiled in the right places. She didn't know who I was. It was still the best 2 hours of my week. When I stood up to leave, I leaned down and I kissed her on the forehead, the way I have kissed her on the forehead every Sunday for 2 years, whether she knows me or not. She reached up and patted my hand. She said, "That's nice. Thank you, dear." She didn't know who she was thanking. I said, "I love you, Mom." She said, "I love you too." She said it the way she says it now, warmly, genuinely, to the nice woman who visits and talks about children, not to her daughter, just to a kind presence. I walked to my car. I sat there for a moment, and then I thought about a Tuesday in March, about the afternoon light, about my name in her voice after 2 years of silence. Barbara, there you are. I've been waiting for you. I was waiting too, Mom. I am still waiting. I will always come back. That is the only promise I know how to keep.